Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. John's off today. Dr. Ann Gillies is standing by with a fantastic guest who was in Ottawa recently for the, well, I'll call it a protest. I'll call it maybe a rebellion even. Might have turned into a rebellion based on the other side showing up and continuing to push their ideology and stand firm in their efforts. But you know, things do take a turn. You've seen the imagery. You've seen what's happened in Los Angeles, California recently, possibly. There's just been a lot of things that have been clashing. We're starting to see groups that are, wanting to keep this away from your kids. And then there's groups that want to keep pushing it on your kids. That clash has started. It started in North America. It's something that, well, we as both Canadians and Americans need to take notice of, and we need to get involved and actively stand strong in this effort to stop this evil ideology from continuing to embed into our schools and our children. With that, Shannon Boschy is with us today. He was a public board candidate in Ottawa, and you didn't get in, Shannon, but that's okay. You still had a positive message there to deliver to them, and they know that you're coming. And it puts a smile on my face to sit here today and have you on the program as well as Dr. Ann. We can't say enough about both of you for all your efforts and the level of committedness that you bring to really the passion and movement that needs to happen against this evil ideology. With that, Dr. Ann, thank you for being here today. I'll let you take it from here, and you guys have lots to discuss, and Ottawa was a big, big day. So, Dr. Ann, you couldn't make it, but I know you got lots of great questions for our viewers today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad. Welcome, Shannon. I am very excited to get this update from you because we've kind of been tracking a little bit. And I thought maybe it might be good to have a little backstory, kind of how this event kind of began and got to the place it was on Friday. Do you want to start there? Is that okay with you?
Sure. Well, I'll go back a little bit in time because, first of all, 6 weeks ago, Chris Elston and Josh Alexander announced that they were going to be protesting on Broadview Avenue, which is in a Tony neighborhood in Ottawa, across from a couple of schools. And that particular location, Broadview Avenue in Carling, is where Chris Elston and myself and Chanel Fall were mobbed by an estimated 200 to 300 protesters in October of 2021. At the time, it was just the three of us. And the school board sent out an email to all the parents in the district of 72,000 students that there was no place for hate and bigotry and transphobia, and maligned us as evil through their communications. They were aided and abetted by CBC, CTV, and the local media, as well as a number of progressive activist groups who rallied people together. Among those people was Joel Hardin, who's our MPP locally, and a city councillor by the name of Catherine McKenney, who ran for mayor, who was looking for some publicity points, and a trans-identified school trustee, among others. So politicians were whipping up an angry mob based on rhetoric, basically labeling us evil and the enemy, which is a very, very dangerous thing to do. So I believe that Chris, and some of his public statements reflect this, and I think I could say the same, that this event profoundly impacted him when we were mobbed. And so in somewhat of a poetic way, I think he decided he was going to go back to that location, this time with the support that has been, it's been growing organically from different community groups all over North America. Chris has been an identifiable, let's say, a character or, an icon in this movement. And when he announced there was both, cries from the Progressive Rainbow Coalition to run him out of town again, the evil, hateful Monster, as well as allies from all over the place, committing to come and join him in his march down the street.
And Chris is a dad, like you were a dad, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe just for our viewers, give a little background why Chris is so passionate about this, because I think that this is really important, and people who don't know Chris need to know this.
Well, Chris is a dad of 2 girls, and it's hard for me to speak entirely to his motivations. He hasn't been affected by the gender ideology the way that I have. I'm a dad of now an adult daughter who was led to believe through her internet use and through affirmation at school that she's actually a boy. 2 years ago, coming up next week, actually, she told me that she was starting the hormone conversion process. And that really kind of activated me into what exactly is going on, what's happening in schools, what's happening online. And a fairly common theme, I think, is both Chris and I share a perspective of I never want to look back, on my life in my late days and say, I wish I had done something about this, or why didn't I do something? I saw that there was something wrong. That was in deep conflict with my values and my vision of who I am, and of the country that I believe I live in, and so that I think it's fair to say that we both share that kind of global, lifelong perspective about making our choices today and doing the best that we can for our own children, for our communities, and for the country that we live in.
And there's so many of us on that same page that for me, it burns in my heart. I cannot stay silent, because from a psychological perspective, and when I see how damaging this is to children, and then from, of course, the research perspective, that is not, what will I say, accepted by mainstream media, but it is very valid and very reliable research. And even the American Psychiatric Association has declared that puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgery are not, they do not change the dysphoria that the child has. And yet, if we speak out, we are all haters. We hate these people, which is the furthest from the truth. And so that's why we really want to talk to you about that. So that's a little background. So you also so that was the planning of it. And then Josh Alexander has come on the scene since then, for sure. And he's stirring up things. And that's really stirring up some young people as well. So there's that piece. And then Pierre Barnes was also there at the rally.
That's right.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
We had people from all over the country. So Pierre flew out from Vancouver.
Awesome.
We had call him a Twitter influencer who's been active on this, come from St. John, New Brunswick. We had people come from all over Ontario, people that I got to know when we were running for school board trustee last fall, all in an effort to raise awareness about the gender issue and about some of the other major issues that are toxic in schools, the false narratives about Indigenous residential schools, and false narratives about our relationship with Black Canadians, and the history of Blacks in Canada. That's sometimes called wokeism, or postmodern ideology, being taught to children as if it's fact, and it's deeply divisive. And so we actually rented an Airbnb where about a dozen of us stayed together. And I've been to a few protests like this and gatherings now, including spending some time at the Truckers Convoy here in Ottawa, not far from where I live. And there's a lot of tremendous trust building and friendship development and relationship building that happens behind the scenes. And for me, that was really the biggest, most important thing that happened here on Thursday and Friday. Pierre Barnes is a tremendous resource. We did a joint presentation to some local parents in a private space that we recorded that and live streamed it, where I gave some background on the group that I'm working on bringing together, or let's say a group trying to connect with other groups called Parents' Rights DOA, that's Day of Action. And I set Pierre up by outlining what's happening in schools and where it came from broadly. And then Pierre Barnes, who's Canada's leading expert on the, pornographic materials that we're finding in middle schools and high schools across Canada, and the kinds of really questionable and frightening ideas that are being shared with very young children. We're talking about kindergarten and grade 1 kids being taught that there's no such thing as boys and girls, and they have to figure out their pronouns, and that they can change sex. And so I was very grateful to meet Pierre in person. We've chatted many times, and I very much enjoyed working with him in that. And then, of course, we had the big protest on Friday, and then the debrief and we shed some tears on Friday night. It was a big emotional day. There was lots of positive things. There was things, of course, we were all sad about and disappointed in. And no one likes to be in the current position that we're in, where we have to stand out in the street because no one is listening in schools, in government, in media, with very few exceptions, and where this is our only recourse. As felt by many parents and people who are objecting to this.
I think none of us 5 years ago could have imagined standing out in the street and protesting. And I mean, for me, that it was kind of like when someone first called me an activist, and it was a lawyer that called me an activist, and a friend, and I'm like shocked. Because I didn't see myself as that. I thought, well, maybe I'm an advocate, but then it's like, no, you're an activist. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting thing. But I found as I've gone along in the last 5 years for myself, I become more and more firm, more and more convicted and convinced that there is no other way in our country, in the climate we are living in right now, than doing this to wake people up. And we've tried so many different things, right? And speaking in small groups and, all those things. So tell me about the Friday rally itself. What's your perception? I'm not even seeing a whole lot on CBC and stuff, which I thought that they might have a problem with this rally because of the number of Muslim women and men. And I was so excited when you told me that, and I mean, I knew that this was coming because their values and views are very much, in this perspective, in the sense of morality, very much like Christians. And so I'm not surprised that they were there, and I am excited to see this joining of arms, and being able to look at a particular area, the sexuality of our children, and to link arms and say, look, we need to fight this together. And it's very hard for mainstream media now to paint this as an evil thing, because if they do, then where does that put the Muslim community? So speak into all that.
Sure. Well, the concerns of Muslims first came onto my radar last summer, and I heard rumors about a school, in Ottawa with a high Muslim population, K-8 school, where 70% of the kids were kept home one day last June. And there had been quite a back and forth between the parents and the administrators of the school. The school had sent out an email announcing that a certain day was going to be the Pride celebration day, to all the parents. And some of the parents got together and they went to talk with the principal and vice principal and said, this is not okay. And we object to this level of celebration. And the administrators presumed then to lecture the Muslims on their own scripture and their own beliefs. Uh, Now, if you follow this issue, in the last couple of weeks, a North American organization of Muslims put out a formal statement about their position on gender ideology, as well as their perspective on tolerance, because they have a practice of acceptance and tolerance of other people who don't share their same beliefs.
Right.
They're not going to actively discriminate or engage with groups that they don't share values with, but they're also not going to celebrate it. So that was their message. We accept people as they are. We recognize not everybody shares our faith. We're not going to engage or antagonize them or say bad things about them. But we have our beliefs, and we would ask that those be respected. So they kept more than 70% of the kids home from that school after this back and forth with the parents. And the Muslim dad I've talked to, and there's lots of people I can pick up the phone and call now, and he's one of them. He gathered about 7,500 signatures in a few days on change.org. And then, as seems par for the course in practice, the progressive activists complained to change.org that this was hateful and bigoted. So they throttled the petition and then took it down a few days later. And then a London, Ontario school has multiple times this year, the largest elementary school in the London school district, more than 30% of kids have been kept home during these days, the Pink Shirt Day and the Trans Day of Visibility and things like that. So this kind of got me thinking about using school absences as a way to communicate a concern. And other organizations as well, Campaign Life Coalition got a hold of this idea as well, and numerous calls across the country over the last month and a half to simply vote or express concern or speak by not speaking, to silently protest the rainbow indoctrination in classes and the overt celebrations by just keeping kids home or planning other wholesome activities with them, with other families, and to let the schools know. So this big thing that happened on June the 1st was that, in Ottawa, there was 9 schools with greater than 40% absences. 2 of those schools had more than 60% absences. We have reports from all across the country. In Alberta, there were big absences in schools. Again, in London, we have reports from Waterloo and Windsor. The same thing. I spoke with a school trustee from Durham region, and they had absences there. And then there was some planned absences on June the 9th as well. We amplified that call, and we built on the momentum. And I think the Chris Elston protest probably overshadowed much of that reporting about those school absences, but we know that there are activated parents in New Brunswick. And Prince Edward Island parents made the news announcing that they were keeping their kids home and promoting this day of absence for June the 9th. So it's all across the country now. People are waking up. It's not just Billboard Chris by himself or him with another couple of people standing on a street and getting mobbed by hundreds. Now people are recognizing, look, the school boards aren't listening. The media is calling us names. This is it's frightening and overwhelming. And there seems to be, like the institutions that we think should be there to help us protect our children are not functioning the way that we think they function. And it's taken us kind of a year. I mean, we knew this going in, and we talked strategically last year, many of us, but we have to go through the process, right? We have to go to the school boards. We have to document the conversations with teachers. We have to engage with the administrators and the school superintendents, and we have to document that process. And that has been done by many, many committed parents and parents groups across the country. We can see the consistent response in school boards from all across Canada, where they're shutting parents down, calling them names, being abusive in the public media, and refusing absolutely to listen to to listen to reality. Boys are boys and girls are girls. You can't change sex. And promoting these ideas in schools is toxic and damaging to our children. And now we've built the foundations of a movement, and people are standing up to join it.
It's exciting. I know for our own school board, I've had lots of involvement over the year since 2018, I guess. But just this summer or this spring, the superintendent of our school board has declared that I am dangerous. I'm dangerous. And I'm like, really? Because I care about these kids. And the saddest thing, Shannon, is that the teachers and the public, general public, even calls us haters. And it's very hard to hear those things, but be it what it is, transphobic, homophobic, I've heard it all for so long, as you have now. And this whole thing is like, it's time. And I believe what you've created and what's happening and the momentum that's happening is exciting. I mean, when I had a call out to parents in 2017 saying, parents, unite, parents, stand up, stand firm, and stand out for your children. And I was, I've had some discouragement over the years, but I have to say, what's been happening in the last 6 months is absolutely thrilling to me, because it feels hopeful. And when I see what happened in Ottawa, it's hopeful. And your ability as a group to merge together, that's extremely exciting.
So let me just break in here for just a quick second. There's a lot that you're discussing already: school boards, trustees. You're talking about sex education a little bit. We've kind of delved into a bunch of those topics. We've had an incident here in Manitoba, and I'm just trying to get maybe a bit of what Shannon thinks on this topic. We've had a trustee over the past week be removed and suspended from being a school board trustee for speaking out against the ideology and speaking up. And it's not the first one here in Manitoba. There's actually a couple. There's a lot that I've been able to find out over the last week or so with regards to these teachers and them being taught this ideology. And they are being taught this ideology, and it's happening during things called PD days. They call it personal development is what the PD stands for. It's not a physical education thing at all, PD, physical development. It has to do with personal development, and the personal development has nothing to do with education. It has to do with this ideology. So the teachers on that Friday of every second, third week, they head off to the University of Manitoba. They sit in a classroom and they're indoctrinated for 8 hours at a time, and it goes on and on and on all year long. That's been confirmed. So the parents don't understand how the teachers are getting this in their heads, where this is coming from. It's coming from that level, and it's coming from the top down, and they're being taught and told and dictated to make sure that they do these things. Now, there's individuals standing up. We're seeing that all across the country, from teachers that have left their jobs to even trustees who have quit and resigned and said, I can't deal with this anymore. Look, we can't quit and we can't give up. The fight needs to be there. These two individuals in Manitoba may be second-guessing themselves right now. They've been taking a lot of heat over the past, this one just last week has been taking a lot of heat. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, more today. The press is trying to get a hold of her to write their story accordingly to suit their needs, much like CBC wrote stories on you, Shannon, and I've gone through those. And what a disgrace. What a disgrace this media is in our country to portray you that way, or even portray these trustees that way. What kind of advice would you give them, Shannon? They need some advice, and they need to hear from the professionals like yourself and Dr. Ann. And where would you take them if they were wanting to just kind of be more reserved and they're unsure and they don't know what to do? What direction would you give them?
Well, first of all, they deserve some thanks for their courage. because it's no surprise when an individual stands up in a toxic organization that's captured by these ideologies that they're going to receive pushback. I've been talking with a school trustee or former school trustee in PEI who has resigned because that she believed that she just couldn't make the kind of difference and impact within that system that she needed to be able to make by connecting and organizing with parents. We've seen multiple trustees in Ontario deal with some difficult circumstances. Carolyn Boschy, the teacher who presented to Waterloo a year ago, January, and lost her job as a teacher as a consequence. Her presentation to the Waterloo School Board resulted in the censure of another trustee, and he was suspended from being able to attend any of the meetings or vote on any of the issues because of that, and another perspective that he took on BLM and critical race theory. He was called a white supremacist when he's a full-blooded Jamaican man. I mean, it's difficult. I would thank those trustees in Manitoba for their courage. Know that they're making a difference. Even being subjected to this policy, the abuses and the toxicity and the clownish behavior of those who are pushing this ideology is laid bare when these kinds of things happen, and they ultimately, I believe, they're for the greater good. We're all making sacrifices in the meantime and paying some consequences, but it like in many cases, if a person is canceled, there are opportunities to come back to the issue and affect it at even bigger levels, and to grow an audience and to grow a platform to be able to communicate that, so that if the traditional ways of trying to affect change and have discourse and talk reasonably about issues aren't working, then we can elevate beyond that and use that those toxic abuses as ways to highlight the issue.
Well, I'm about to do that here next week when we get into another school board meeting that actually let this one individual go. It just so happens to be my district, and not my district, our district. But bottom line is we need to give them a little bit more advice than that. Would you recommend after a 3-month suspension that they wait to be fired, or should they go in there and kind of come back in and apologize and get in under the radar? And then
I'm imagining they're already talking with lawyers. And if they are not talking with lawyers, there are a number of different legal organizations in Canada that are looking for these kinds of cases to support in pushback. I mean, we're talking about democratically elected officials whose colleagues are weaponizing the codes of conduct within their organizations to silence the voices of constituents in a democracy. The elected representative represents the people of their constituency, and by not allowing them to speak, we are really violating our democratic norms and demonstrating some very concerning types of behaviors and cracks in our system.
Dr. Ann?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to suggest. I think that they need to team up with lawyers, because I don't think this isn't a time to pull back from the fight. And I hope this woman will not do that. I know that, it's very, the first time you're in the fray like that is very disconcerting. And so the tendency is, oh my goodness, I need to self-protect. But we will hopefully see her come out of that and decide, no, I need to protect the children. They are why I'm working, why I went into the whole, trustee as an elected official, like you said. And so hopefully we'll see her start to push ahead. And I think that's what we want. We want to get people stirred up. And you're right, Shannon, it gives her a platform she never had before.
Absolutely, you guys, and that's exactly what I've been trying to convince her of. Your wording here today is why I asked those questions, so that any trustee around the country who's at a wit's end about this has an opportunity to hear our words of advice and your words of advice that are going to hopefully really live on within them and provide the strength and the courage and the aggression that's going to be needed to go forward. I mean, you can't sit back and cry in the corner. You need to come out with not guns blazing, but definitely you need to come out and put a little fire into this and a little pepper and make it a little spicier and bring your attitude to the game, because if we don't, other people won't. You can say it as nicely as you want. You guys have both been nice on here all day long, and you'll be nice every time I talk to you. But the reality is there's a frustration growing within every single one of us who are going through this, or dealing with this, or trying to make a difference so that we can stop it. That burning in our stomach isn't going to go away. That passion for stopping this isn't going to leave. Like Dr. Ann and I have said many a time, we'll fight till we die on this hill, and that's just the way it has to be. And we have morals, we have ethics, we know the difference between right and wrong, and there's a lot of people out there that may be questioning whether they're going to do the right thing or the wrong thing. The right thing is to stand up. The right thing is to take aim. The right thing is to go and be a really committed and really focused on what your goal is, and find the resources and the information that not only we bring to the table here today, but the resourceful information that's on the internet to help you phrase your paragraphs properly. To if you're going into court, obviously that's a whole nother level, and you're going to need some good words there too. And people like you guys are the reason that you bring them hope. You bring them, you're willing to even write some of those paragraphs for some of them that are going through this kind of information, right? And they need help in court, and they need, affidavits from people like you guys that say, we're standing up for this, and, we're here with them because they've got the courage to do it too in court today. So thank you both for your efforts. There's so much more to talk about. Dr. Ann, we kind of left a little bit there. I kind of took you guys off a different path, but I knew that I needed to break in somewhere, and with the school board stuff that you were talking about, I knew that transition might be a good place. So from there, where do we go? Ottawa was fun. Ottawa was engaging, which is what's starting to happen across the country. But where do we head from here, Dr. Ann?
Well, first of all, I think what Shannon said, debriefing with your group, it was really, really important, because that helps strategize. I think we need to see what happened in Ottawa and every single major city across Canada. I think we need to be seeing those kind of events, teaching, training events for people like this trustee and others that are starting to go, wait a minute, we need some information. We need to understand why this is so wrong, really from a research perspective, I think, as well as just a moral perspective. Both are very, very important. So we want to keep teaching. We want to keep people motivated, I think, to battle for their children. And when they find out what really is being celebrated, I think that's part of the issue, is that people do not know what is being celebrated. And if we can bring that to the forefront and help people understand, then that will create a wave that is going to really go across Canada. Your thoughts, Shannon, on that?
Yeah, we can see the momentum of that wave building already. We've had some really incredible news in the last couple of weeks, tying into what Brad was saying about writing paragraphs and providing resources for people. In the last couple of weeks, I did write a paragraph for an Ontario MPP who read part of that in the legislature. And there have been some groups writing and preparing briefs for the Premier of New Brunswick, Blaine Higgs, who late last week, Thursday, was able to avoid a no confidence vote on the issue and pass some amendments to the education policy in New Brunswick. Now, Premier Higgs and his education minister Hogan are the first two elected officials in Canada to stand up to gender ideology. There were a lot of us speaking about it at the school board level. Of course, Maxime Bernier has made this a point of his platform. He's running in a by-election currently. There is someone running in Vancouver under the Tory banner, Karen Litsky, who's talking about gender ideology and and the toxicities of wokeness in her campaign. So it's starting to be seen at the political level, but really Higgs and Hogan are two leaders here. I won't name the group, but a very, very competent group of people working behind the scenes. They kind of began as a letter writing collaborative, and they gathered some resources in terms of scientific research, legal research, communications research. They put together a tremendous brief for the cabinet of New Brunswick. I believe that's had a strong impact on their direction. I'm very fortunate now that I've been doing this for a while. People reach out to me, and one of the let's call that person an influencer around the cabinet of New Brunswick reached out to me and gave me some updates on Thursday after they narrowly avoided the confidence issue and the potential of an election, to say that this is a first step for New Brunswick, that they have a commitment to get this ideology out of schools. They understand exactly what's happening. They understand how it got into the institutions and what needs to be done to get it out, and they're prepared, if necessary, to go to an election. There was some dissidents within their cabinets. Those dissidents have been told that if you bring down the government, we'll replace you in an election, and we've already got candidates to take your seat, and so get on board, or decide that it's time to get out of politics. And
I think. Sorry, that is the most exciting news. And I just actually sent a letter to Premier Higgs today, and included in that letter a brief that I sent about a month ago to Augusta, Maine, to their judiciary, and 2-minute brief, right? But I had really great feedback from that. I wasn't able to be there to present it, but the lady that presented it was really excited because of the feedback. And so now what they have done is postpone voting on this until January, which is awesome, because it didn't get through, even though GLAD was there and, the proponents. And so I sent that to Premier Higgs today, and I'm thinking, okay, anyway, and this is what these people that are on the front lines in the political realms need to have us behind them, because they need to know they have the support of the people who are, starting to stand up. And that's really important, because the backlash, it really is getting more and more intense. And I'm seeing that. I just got an email today from some psychologists that I'm in this group, and it was basically a hit piece on about 4 different really, these are psychiatrists and psychologists, Dr. Michael Laidlaw, one of them, and anyways, just trying basically to just rip their credentials to pieces, and they don't know what they're talking about, and all of this stuff, because there's a lot of anger in the U.S. Because all of this is starting to implode. Yep. Within different states. Then they are banning gender affirming care, and it's tremendously exciting. It's not that we don't want to help these children, but we want to help them with the mental health issues, the social contagion issues. We want to get to the bottom of this stuff and not be putting them on puberty blockers and hormone therapy that is going to damage them for life. So we have lots of exciting news, but here people on the front lines research-wise have been battling this for a long time, and the battle's intensifying, so we have to stay in the game.
Yeah, while there is good news, there are battles that get won in every war. The fact remains that this is a type of war. We are in a crisis in society, the kind of crisis we haven't seen in many, many decades. There are a lot of similarities. This is some of the things that we were talking about together on Friday night. There's a lot of similarities to what's happening on the street right now, with factions squaring off against each other, to what was happening in Europe before the Second World War. Yep. The communists and the fascists would go toe to toe. The information environment was full of propaganda and lies. No one really knew what the truth was, and could really boil down to it. But people were so inflamed that they were squaring off. And on Friday there was some violence, and some videos are coming out today of some of that violence. 5 people were arrested. All of the people who were arrested were from the rainbow activist side. Part of the reason maybe that the CBC isn't covering this is because it's so embarrassing.
Yes.
The behavior and the tactics and the outfits, and there was some very creepy people at that protest on the rainbow activist side, and some very, very tragic scenes. There was 4 teenage girls they're dressed all in black like the goth. Their faces are full of piercings, and they're clearly on testosterone. You can hear it in their voices. They've developed facial hair, and they're sitting, off to the side of the protest. These are the victims
Yes.
of this ideology, and the reality is none of the people dressed in their rainbow gear, the member of provincial parliament, the school board trustees, the city councilors who are there, trying to get clicks and raise their profile and virtue signal, none of them actually care about the victims of this. And you can see it just by looking at them, how this weighs on them. This is not a healthy path to be on. It's not a path that leads to the flourishing of our individual humanity, and to grow into healthy adults that are contributing to the world. This is deeply, deeply sad.
Yes, and that's what I would say. It's when you see our laws and our bylaws subjecting, and I would say this, subjecting our children to such radical mutilation, and that it makes you want to weep.
When sadness turns to anger, things will get accomplished, and that is the bottom line.
Yes, I want to be sad sometimes, but it's true. You have to have that fire. You have to have a certain amount of anger to begin to really speak out. And I'm not talking about battling anger, because we're seeing the other side that are being
they're weaponizing
violent.
themselves, and we're not about that. We're never going to take that aim, and we're never going to take that action. We need to defend ourselves, yes, 100%. And if we stay in a defensive mode, I think we're going to win the day.
Yes.
Just because you don't have an offensive tactic doesn't mean that you're going to lose. I'm a hockey coach, 25 years. There's all kinds of ways to win the end of the day. And bottom line is, everybody that is part of that rainbow ideology, I say it every show I can, Shannon, they're the same people we picked last in gym class, and they'll always be those people.
Yep. Yeah, it's very true.
So, Shannon, just another thought about how many people were in attendance there.
My initial estimate, I was fairly conservative, was a total of maybe 600. And then I talked to a couple police officers independently, and I reevaluated some pictures that I had seen and was able to see beyond some of the signs and the scope of the protest. Chris Elston put up a number of about 1,000 people combined. I think he makes the accurate observation. This was the largest protest and confrontation about gender ideology in Canadian history. It takes an awful lot to get people to come out to a protest. We're talking about Muslim moms and grandmas and children, and Muslim men, and there are people from Christian organizations, a number of different ones. People like myself who consider themselves more secular and not affiliated with these groups, but we had trans a trans woman who was protesting against the rainbow ideology because they feel that their experience is being appropriated and they're getting used, and that the children shouldn't be involved in these things. There were gays and lesbians on the side of the protest because they're upset with what's happening with gays and lesbians. And Josh Alexander and his youthful cohort. There were lots of veterans there, and people like Pierre Barnes, and working across the country.
A true Canadian hero. A true Canadian hero at this point in my eyes, and I'm sure yours as well. I want to bring that up because he deserves a lot of credit for every bit of effort he's put into this. Yeah,
he's a real man of character, and when you have a chance to talk to him, that absolutely comes through. While it takes an awful lot to get people out to a protest as well, the day of absence thing is a little easier for parents to do. Because you don't have to get into a confrontation. You don't have to get in a fight with the teacher. You don't have to get to the point where they're saying, but that's human rights and you're violating human rights, or you're dangerous. They just have to act by not acting. And what we've seen is a real uptick in that silent type of protest, just non-participation. And I hope that continues as a tactic, because for many, many people, it's scary to go to a protest. This time around, I was there shoulder to shoulder with Chris Elston in October 21 when we were mobbed, and I decided this time I wasn't going to go into the protest field itself. It was quite chaotic. I wasn't there to shout at people or be shouted at. I observed. I talked to a lot of people coming and going. Some people from the opposite side of the perspective were gracious enough to have a conversation, but I wasn't going out of my way to try and convert anybody. A great chance to shake hands and meet people from all over and get the word out a little bit. It won't be the last. The insider I talked to in New Brunswick is looking for a way to have a significant parental presence and protest in Fredericton at some point later this year. They're helping to organize a parents group out there that are concerned about this. I've talked to a number of parents out there, and they're figuring out how to do this on the fly, because we haven't had to organize politically like this in generations. There's an opportunity, I think, for a real renewal if we can collectively get to the point where we say no to this ideology. We set ourselves up with the big task of rebuilding something with integrity on the other side. I think that it will be better than what it was before, assuming we can get there.
And that's a good message for all the teachers out there that have left their jobs, or the trustees who have been put on suspension or been fired. You're absolutely correct. We're going to need to fix this, and good people are going to be needed. We've seen a lot of people, Shannon, out in British Columbia, Alberta. There's been some revolt here in Manitoba too, where parents are just flat out taking their kids out of school and saying, that's it, time for homeschooling. You can't get that ideology when you're looking after your own kids. And that's one of the main things that the school has decided, that they own our kids now. And that's just not right. I tell my kids this all the time. What brought you into this world? Well, guess what? I can, and you know how that ends. But the truth of the matter is that they think they own our kids, and that's so disturbing to me. And they think that they can just push this ideology and teach them. Not even has nothing to do with education. This is about messing up the minds of North Americans. Period.
Yeah. It's deeply political, Brad. And you mentioned earlier the professional development days that teachers are going to, and you're right. This is very much a thing. Teachers I've been talking to for the last couple of years have said, like, every single one of our PD days, every one of our committee meetings is just soaked in this stuff. But where we have a significant problem is that this is what's being taught in the ed schools. So the departments of education in universities are taking kids who are at a impressionable point in their lives. They're they're indoctrinating them in this ideology. It's not just trans ideology, but it's rooted in something called the pedagogy of the oppressed, which is a Marxist. The writer's name is Paulo Freire. So Marxism has captured the educational teacher training institutions in North America, and they're being taught how to teach kids. And this is a way of creating a generation of activist children that are ideologically possessed. And it fundamentally is disrespectful of the role of parents in children's lives. It undermines, triangulates children in that system, turns them against their parents because of the kind of hatred that it conveys. Now, there are good teachers within the system. There's still a lot of them. They're frustrated. They're walking around on eggshells. They're worried that they're going to be reported anonymously, that they could be investigated. Being a teacher in today's education system in Canada is like living in an Eastern Bloc country in the 1960s and 70s. There are secret police. There are mechanisms. There's a Stasi class or a commissar class that are expanding bureaucracy within those systems to enforce the ideology of teachers. So we've got this young cohort of teachers coming up that are bringing the ideology. Not all of them are really radicals, but they all have this basic framework. And then we have teachers retiring and leaving their profession. So the entire institution of education, public education in Canada, is becoming ideologically purified through this whole process, which is really quite frightening.
So we're talking 16 years of indoctrination. When you really think about it, we're talking 16 years minimum. That's if they go to university or college after for a couple of years. That is a hell of a lesson and a hell of a time frame to learn that lesson, and they keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So if your kid's in kindergarten this year, think about 13 years from now and how indoctrinated and what that's going to look like. Think about where we're headed, because we keep looking at what's being forced down our throats today. I don't think we're paying enough attention to the future and to what becomes of all of this once it really takes shape and takes hold of our children.
Well, I think... Oh, I'm sorry, Shannon.
Schools right now feel like they can just be overt and explicit. They're not caring about being challenged anymore on this, because they think that they own the narrative. The Ottawa School Board that we're protesting on Friday put out Thursday or Friday morning a directive. It was published in the Epoch Times that in September, all teachers are to, by default, use they, them pronouns with children. Until such time as they can establish the pronouns that children most identify with, the default is all children be referred to as they, them. And one of the people in the Orbit, conversation said, well, that's just a stepping stone to calling everybody comrade for simplicity. We're in a frightening place. The stuff that my parents warned me about and my grandparents warned me about from Russia is here, and we need to be aware of it.
Well, I think what we really have to understand is that you talked about this, Brad, is academia. Academia has been corrupt for decades. And the amount of teaching now on pedophilia and within the humanities. And I mean, this is where we're headed. We're headed into such a dark time. And my take, and I'll just finish with this, is that I am not convinced that the school system as it stands can be redeemed. I believe it needs to collapse. And I believe that classical education needs to resurface, and there needs to be, I'm not sure it's going to be in the schools unless we take over the schools. I mean, I'm not talking about a radical takeover, but I'm talking about a collapse of a system. And the only people that can make that happen are the parents.
Listen, you're talking about a system that's dumbing our kids down. It did a number on our generation, and it's doing a number on our kids' generation now too. Yes. You know, how
Yeah.
smart could we really be? What things could we have accomplished if we would have known, right?
Well, their education, their actual education, and their scores academically are just nosediving because they're not getting the education that they deserve, and that should make every parent angry.
Keep teaching them about this crap instead of math, and how to do your taxes, or how to grow a garden, or how to fix a car. I mean, there's all kinds of things there that need to be addressed, and this ideology is something that is very concerning. We're almost out of time, guys. Shannon, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here to kind of do a wrap up for us on any thoughts you may have or anything we may have missed today.
Well, I'll build a little bit on what Ann was just saying. You know, we're reaching a point where we're asking ourselves, what can we do about this? And one of the things that we can do about this, and Dr. Ann mentioned the classical school, is to lobby our governments for a voucher system. Now, every kid in the education system has a dollar sign attached to their head. When they enroll in a school, that school gets a certain budgetary allowance. In Ontario, it's about $13,000 per student. Now, Alberta is the only province in the country that has a voucher system, and they have a growing number of charter schools. So charter schools are schools that are based on a charter or like a constitution, where parents and academics get together and they say, this is the framework we want to build our education around for this school. And there are it's one organization, but two schools that have now opened up for the classical education system in Alberta. And these charters can be established to build, trades and practical skills for kids. They can be built around, arts and humanities. They can be built around all kinds of different frameworks for education. And they have to meet the curriculum requirement, which makes some people worry a little bit. But the curriculum is mostly not the problem here. It's the ideology that's kind of layering itself on top. So some of those steps towards the future, lobbying our governments towards a charter school opportunity, a voucher system to allow innovation in the education of our children, to bring it back to a more community level. Parents need to recognize that we can't assume that our institutions are working the way that they are supposed to. We have been complacent for too long, and it's time. My generation, I'm a Generation Xer. Everyone I seem to meet, with some exception, seems to be from my cohort. My friends who are retiring or retired already feel like, well, okay, this is not my fight, and I don't have the energy for this. And those of us who are in mid-career and who have resources and who have, maybe the kids are grown and gone, have a ton of opportunity. I'm building out the website Parents' Rights DOA, and I'm going to start with a list of organizations across the country that parents can get involved with. I've talked to people from every province now, and so we want to be able to be just a pass-through website. Click on your parents' organization in Prince Edward Island or New Brunswick or Manitoba or BC. Get involved with people in your area. Talk to them about this, and we've got to take a real active approach right now to reining this in, or we're giving up our country.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for being here. This fight isn't going to go away, not anytime soon. We're going to have to keep up the efforts, and it's both of you that continue to drive me to go forward, and your words provide strength and support for others. Give them the education that they need along the way too, to understand all of this. And there's a lot of parents that are confused, moms who are sitting at home and crying about where they're headed. They're fighting with their kids. They don't know anything about any of this, and it's such their kids are educating them, and that's where we need to take notice and really step up as parents. If you're not talking to your kids about this, what are you talking to them about? Because this is far more important than any social activity they've got going, from hockey to basketball to going out and hanging out on the weekend at the lake. it's something that's concerning for all of us, and I hope that we, at the end of the day today, we've reached into somebody's heartstrings and gave them a good tug and made them think about all of this, because without this conversation and without more conversations in the future, not only with what we're trying to accomplish to stop it, but more conversations with the other side to help them know that they've been duped, that they've been played, and that they're stuck in a real evil place, and they feel it just like we feel it. They feel that passion for their own side, but once they get broken down and they really have to start to think about things, they're going to be crying probably a lot harder than us. So keep those tears dry, keep the fight going, keep your head above water, and let's make this happen and make a difference in our children's future. I'm Brad Wilder. Thank you, Dr. Ann Gillies, Shannon Boschy, for being here, both of you. There's more to come. There's so much more to come. I'm hoping that we can get a great interview with that trustee who was let go here in Manitoba coming up, as well as the other trustee here in Manitoba. And we've heard your story today, Shannon, and we really appreciate you getting involved and doing everything that you've done and that you're still going to continue to do. With that, this is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Please remember, you can find all of our episodes online. We have our own website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. You can find us on BitChute and Rumble as well. And John just set up the YouTube channel too, so please make sure you take a look. Till next time, remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. We'll see you soon.